This is continuous coverage.
Continuous coverage.
In the trial of Lori Vallow Daybell from the Hidden Killers podcast.
Hidden Killers podcast.
It is. Let's go to the courtroom for today's segment number 1 in the trial of Lori Vallow Daybell.
Okay, we're back on the record on case CR 22-21-1624, State of Idaho versus Lori Noreen Vallow. The state's continuing presenting its case in chief during the jury trial. The jurors are all present and accounted for. I believe have all also signed their juror affirmation for the day. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Bailiff. Again, thank you to the jurors for your continued service and for continuing to follow that admonishment each day as we break for the day. At this time, the court notes the prosecution is present as well as the defendant and the defense. The witness, Dr. Christensen, was testifying yesterday and was previously placed under oath. I will remind the witness you are still under oath. The state completed its direct examination, and I believe we would be starting this morning with cross-examination. Would that be you, Mr. Thomas?
I'll be doing that, Judge.
All right, Mr. Thomas, if you'd like to start your cross-examination at this time, you may.
Thank you. Morning, Dr. Christensen.
Good morning.
So, I believe you testified on direct examination that you went to medical school at the University of Virginia, but you didn't really disclose where you did your undergraduate work. Where'd you do that?
I did my undergraduate degree at Brigham Young University.
BYU?
Yes.
Okay. And what year did you graduate from undergrad?
1986.
Okay. And then I believe you said you went to Walter Reed Medical Center. Where is Walter Reed at?
Walter Reed Army Medical Center is in Washington, D.C. That's where I did my internship training in pediatrics.
And at that point, were you a hospital-based pathologist at Walter Reed, or was that somewhere else?
That was subsequent to that. I initially did pediatric training for 1 year at Walter Reed. Then I spent 3 years working for the Army as a flight surgeon and general medical officer. I was also the chief of the Department of Primary Care at Fort Huachuca for 2 years. And then subsequent to that, did training in anatomic and clinical pathology.
So you went into the Army after medical school, is that
yes.
right? Okay.
Technically, before they paid for medical school, I was a reservist while I was in medical school.
Oh, okay. You described a little bit about what pathology is, and that it basically you take fluid samples or tissue samples or autopsies, and you look at those and try to find if there's any type of disease or natural process, or what is it? What is it about pathology? Is that right?
Yes, that's a good description.
Okay. And specifically, you said in order to become a forensic pathologist, first you have to go through, be a board-certified anatomic pathologist?
That's correct.
And what is an anatomic pathologist?
Anatomic pathology is what you train in your regular anatomic and clinical pathology residency. It's learning to diagnose cancers. It's learning to, run learning lab medicine and all of those things. But anatomic pathology specifically is focused on the examination of disease in tissues.
Okay. All right. And in this particular case, there was a death certificate that was issued, and you reviewed that death certificate as part of this case study?
I did.
Okay. And what was the findings on the death certificate?
I believe it was the cause of death was certified as cardiac arrest due to pulmonary edema.
Okay. And your findings were inconsistent with that death certificate?
Are different from that. Certainly, as I explained yesterday, pulmonary edema is not really a cause per se. You can have pulmonary edema and not die, and it's something that results from multiple causes of death, but it's not something that without further explanation is an adequate explanation for why a person died.
And you talked a little bit yesterday about pulmonary edema being that frothy substance that was on the outside of her mouth. Is that correct?
Yes, that is one manifestation of it. It's primarily a process in the lungs, but it does sometimes manifest externally like that.
Okay. And are you aware as to whether or not that frothy substance was ever collected and tested?
My understanding was not.
Okay. Is that something that would normally happen?
No.
No. So if somebody's brought into your, what do you call it? It's not a medical clinic, right?
The medical examiner's office.
Medical examiner's office. When somebody's brought into your medical examiner's office and you open up unzip the bag and they have that frothy substance, does that just get cleaned off and doesn't get tested, doesn't get looked at?
It gets documented in terms of photography. We take pictures of it so that we have documentation that sit there, but there's no testing that would be done on it. I don't know what testing you would do on it.
Well, I guess my thought might be, and I'm most likely wrong, I have been before, and this is not a super exceptional circumstance, but my thought process would be that maybe there were some poisons or something in the frothy substance that might be able to be tested.
I don't know that you could collect enough of it to test. Most lab testing requires minimum sample volumes, usually on the order of at least 1 milliliter, and usually that froth is not anywhere near that volume that would be there. And there are better samples to use from an autopsy, tissue or blood.
Okay. As part of the autopsy process, is it normal for you to examine the mouth and inside the mouth?
Yes.
And did you do that on this particular case?
Yes.
Even after the embalming process where I think they sew up the mouth. Is that right?
They generally will put a wire through the upper and lower jaw to hold the jaw in place, yes.
Okay. And you remove that and you examine the mouth?
I actually don't recall specifically that, but I would assume so.
Okay.
I don't have a specific recollection of that, but that would be a routine part of the process.
Was that documented in your report?
In the report, no. I would have to look at the photograph. Photographs would probably document that.
Okay. The photographs that we had earlier that were presented to you yesterday didn't show any of that, right?
They did not, no.
Okay. X-rays are generally taken, you indicated. Were X-rays taken on this particular case?
They were.
And was there anything out of the ordinary with those X-rays?
No.
Okay. And when you got to your conclusions as to the cause of death being asphyxia, you explained that asphyxia is basically when a person is deprived of oxygen. Is that right?
Yeah, inability to have enough oxygen, inability to breathe normally. Yes.
Okay. And you indicated that a couple of those different ways to do that, or 3 different ways to do that, would be drowning would be an example of asphyxia.
It would. Mm-hmm.
And hanging would be an example of asphyxia.
It could be, yes.
And that there was some sort of a chemical asphyxia, like a carbon monoxide poisoning or something that would inhibit the person being able to breathe.
Yes.
All right. And you also indicated that asphyxia was a diagnosis of exclusion?
Yes.
All right. And so in this particular case, you did X-rays, didn't find anything abnormal. You did internal and external exam, didn't find anything abnormal. Is that right?
Correct.
So, and I'm more than likely I am oversimplifying this, but when someone has a seizure, you indicated that it was some sort of a brain response. Is that right? Tell me a little bit about what.
Yeah, a seizure is abnormal electrical activity in the brain that can manifest in a variety of ways.
Abnormal electrical activity in the brain. And so once someone has passed, that brain activity obviously ceases, right?
Correct.
Mm-hmm. And so there's no way to really restart that or to check to see what abnormal electrical issues there are in that particular person, right?
Yes, that's correct.
So kind of like a car, when you have a car and it has a dead battery, you don't know if there's something wrong with the engine or not because you can't start the car. Does that make sense?
I suppose, yes. Mm-hmm.
All right. And so with this particular case, with Tammy's death, you're not sure what happened as far as if there were any seizures, if that caused any type of other electrical abnormalities that could have caused her death, right?
I'm not sure what you mean by unsure. I think it's very unlikely that happened.
Okay.
So,
and the unlikeliness of that happening is based on your review of her medical records and her past history?
And clinical medical experience with, just the nature of new onset seizures in someone of her age, yes.
And when you say nuances of seizures, you indicated that she was on, I believe it was fluoxetine?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And is that a generic version of Prozac?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And isn't it true that Prozac, one of the long-term side effects of Prozac includes seizures?
It probably does.
All right. And so if there's a possibility of seizures as part of her medical regimen, and her husband indicated to the medical examiner, and which was in her reports and whatnot that you reviewed, saying that she had seizures, would that make it possible that she may have passed from a seizure?
Again, there are many things that are possible. I cannot absolutely exclude that she had seizure activity, but I just think it's very, very unlikely.
Okay. But the truth of the matter is that you really didn't do any tests on this dead body because there was no electrical activity going on in the body. Right?
Well, there are no tests that you can do to document seizures after someone has died, but we did have a neuropathologist examine her brain, which was revealed to be completely normal.
Right. And tell me a little bit about that neuropathologist. Who was that?
His name is Dr. Andrew Gohardo, works in our office.
Okay. And how long has he worked with you?
He's been in our office since 2019.
Okay. And in your experience as a medical doctor and as a pathologist, have you ever worked in this particular field, the neuropathology?
I am not a neuropathologist, no.
Right. But was it part of your study or part of your training?
Yes, it is.
All right. So you knew what he was doing, and did he just explain it to you, or did he show you? I guess I don't really know what he did. Did he take the brain out and slice it open and pull it apart and look at it?
Yeah, we remove the brain as part of the examination. We then preserve it in formaldehyde for a period of time, and then he subsequently did an exam for which I was present. And he then does a thorough examination, takes photographs, and generates a report as well.
Okay, so you saw him do what he did?
Yes.
Did he cut the brain open?
Yes.
Okay, and did he take samples out of that brain?
Yes.
Okay, and from where about in the brain did he take those?
I would have to review the report. I would imagine from the hippocampus and other places, but I don't know without referencing the report specifically. I don't recall.
Okay. Do you have your report with you?
Yes.
Would you like to review that?
If you'd like, sure.
Sure, go ahead.
So he took sections of both hippocampi.
I'm sorry, you can't really review. You can review the report and then you have to put it back. I'm not trying to be a jerk, but
That's fine.
that's just how it works.
So he took sections of both hippocampi, of the medulla, of two portions of the cortex of the cerebrum, and the basal ganglia, I believe, and portion of the cerebellum.
Okay. And where would he have been looking for seizure activity in that dissection of the brain?
So he's not looking for seizure activity. What he's looking for in those sections of brain are anatomic abnormalities that are associated with seizures.
Okay. So it's possible that he could have missed something.
Possible.
Okay. And it's possible that she died of a seizure of natural causes, right?
Possible.
Mm-hmm. Was there anything in the medical records that you reviewed, or any of the collateral reports that you reviewed, that may have talked about Tammy's use of vitamins or essential oils or other homeopathic type remedies?
It was mentioned in a couple of places that she did use those in different ways. I don't have any indication as specifically how she used them. In the photographs that were taken by the coroner at the scene, there were many essential oils and other non-pharmaceuticals that were present at the scene, which we went through and listed and looked up to see what they were.
Right. And so when somebody has a history of using those things, I mean, it's possible to overdose on some vitamins or some essential oils, right, and die from that?
There is nothing you can't overdose on, given enough of it, yes.
Okay. Specifically, vitamin A, one of the side effects of overdosing on that is death. Is that right?
Yes, but that's a long-term process. I'm not aware of any situation where someone would die acutely from vitamin A toxicity. I've seen that actually before in some people, but it generally is people that take too much for an extended period of time. It leads to liver failure.
Okay. And did you review this for any type of vitamin poisoning?
We didn't see any evidence of it.
Okay.
So, I mean, specifically, we did not test for vitamins, no.
Didn't test for it. Did you test for any essential oils or any essential oil type poisoning?
No, I'm not aware of any testing available for that.
Okay. Okay. You did a lot of testing for poisons, right?
Yes.
And that's basically because she had such a, I don't want to say normal, but normal autopsy. I mean, it was hard to find a cause of death, right? That's why you kind of lean towards poisoning. Is that right?
That's certainly part of the reason, yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. You tested for some heavy metals?
Yes.
And what was the purpose of doing that?
Heavy metal poisoning can lead to death.
Okay. And you specifically sent it to a chemical lab that you have in Utah?
Yes.
What kind of a chemical lab is that?
It's part of the Utah Public Health Lab. It's what they call a chemical threat response lab that is involved in monitoring for both bioweapons and chemical weapons agents, among other things.
Do many states have that?
I actually don't know how many states have that.
Okay. But your state has it, Utah has it. Is that because of the Twila Army Depot and the chemical weapons?
I'm not aware of the history of it or why it's there.
Okay, all right. Then you sent some stuff off to the National Medical Lab Services, or National Medical Services Lab in Pennsylvania, is that right?
Correct, yes.
And is that just a big lab that services all over the country?
Yes, it is a reference lab for forensic toxicology testing as well as other clinical testing, and they do some crime lab things as well. I think they do DNA testing. We don't use them for that, but they're a very large forensic toxicology reference lab.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about your review of the external body of Tammy Daybell. Some of the bruising was significantly more severe, I guess, than some of the other bruises. Is that right?
I don't know that I would characterize it that way.
Okay.
Certainly, some of it in the sections that we reviewed yesterday showed more hemorrhage than other areas, but they are all relatively, superficial, you would say, or they're tissue injuries, on the with the surface and the immediate, underneath tissue. They're certainly not in any way a lethal injury or anything of that nature.
So when you say a serious hemorrhage, they weren't. I guess I'm just saying there was one that you looked at that had the surface of the skin, and then there was a significant amount of black substance. I'm assuming it's blood.
Yes.
Underneath that, in that fatty tissue. Is that right?
Yes.
You recall the one that I'm thinking of?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
All right. And some of the other ones that you pulled were more closer to the skin, which means they had less hemorrhaging that went, I guess it went less deep. Does that make sense?
Yes. Mhm.
All right. So in order for something like that to happen, would it be consistent with someone falling or hitting something or being hit with something, or would it be more consistent with fingerprints or somebody holding someone down?
Yeah, I think, as I said yesterday, those types of blunt injuries generally are non-specific as to there's nothing I can look at any one of those individual injuries or even collectively and say, this is caused by this. They're not specific as to what caused them. I can tell you they're consistent with this or that or the other thing. And to answer your question specifically, could you fall down and sustain a bruise like that? Sure.
Okay. What, if anything, makes them consistent with your cause of death being asphyxia?
Just their location and the number of them and their age by looking at them microscopically.
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit about the age of these. You said once the area is hemorrhaged and you have that breaking of the blood vessels, then you said that there is a period of time where nothing happens, and then there's a period of time where white blood cells kind of attack that area. Is that right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
All right. So tell me a little bit about the attacking of that area to heal the body or whatever. How long does that take?
It can begin as quickly as a couple of hours. It can take a day or more in some cases, and there's not really any way to know exactly where on that spectrum any individual injury is. But until you see inflammatory cells, you know that at most you're looking at several hours.
And when you looked at these particular, I can't remember what you called them. Did you call them slides? Or what did you call them?
Slides is what I ended up looking at, yes.
Okay. And you looked at them underneath a microscope?
That's correct.
Okay. And there was no cell activity where it looked like they were trying to, the white cell activity looked like it was trying to heal?
No, there was no inflammatory response in any of them.
Inflammatory response. Okay. You specifically talked a little bit about the time of death and how you really couldn't estimate the time of death. The prosecutor asked you if this would be consistent with happening prior to, if the call was made at 6 o'clock, prior to 5:40 a.m., and you really couldn't give us a definite answer on when this time of death was, right?
Well, I believe I said specifically that it's unlikely to have occurred, around 5:30 or close to the time of her discovery if she's already stiff at that time.
Okay.
But beyond that, is it 1 hour, 3 hours, 5 hours, 10 hours? I can't tell you.
Okay. So it's possible that the Tammy had been lying dead in her bed for a number of hours prior to her discovery?
That's certainly possible.
Okay. Did you happen to review in your study of this particular case a forensic pathology report from Raven Pathology Associates?
Yes, I believe I did.
Okay. In that particular report, she had a different result than what you had, right?
I believe so, yes.
I'd like to show that if the witness, what we've marked as defendant's, I believe, E. I'll just withdraw it. I'm going to withdraw that question, Judge.
Okay.
All right. Okay, no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Thomas. Redirect examination?
Just briefly, Your Honor.
Very well.
Dr. Christensen, you were asked if your findings differed from that of the original death certificate or the coroner. They, in fact, did differ, correct?
They did.
And as part of that, because the cause of death listed on that certificate is not actually a cause of death?
It's not an explanation for why someone would die, yes.
But you did, in fact, see signs of pulmonary edema, is that correct?
We did, yes.
So in that sense, that at least that finding was similar. It's just the coroner had listed that as the cause of death when, in fact, that is not the cause.
Correct. I mean, she might have listed, as she did, cardiac arrest due to pulmonary edema, but then it would require an additional line of explanation due to something else, due to heart failure, due to drowning, due to drug overdose, due to asphyxia, whatever. It's pulmonary edema is an insufficient explanation for why someone died.
And similar with cardiac arrest, and I'm going to forget the terminology that you used yesterday, but they are essentially a symptom or a result of the actual cause of death.
Correct.
And I think we talked about this yesterday as well, but a coroner is very different from a medical examiner or forensic pathologist, correct?
Just in training, yes. Mm-hmm.
But you have significantly more training?
With respect to death investigation, yes.
And coroners are not required to attend medical school?
No.
They're not required to attend all the training that you attended?
No.
In addition to that, coroners, generally speaking, do not perform autopsies.
They do not in most cases.
And in performing the autopsy, does that assist in your determining a cause of death?
It does.
Does it assist in your determining the manner of death?
It does.
You did, I think you've previously testified, you've been asked a lot today by defense about seizures and if that could be a potential cause. I believe you testified yesterday when you're looking at a negative autopsy, there are a limited number of causes that you're generally looking into.
That's correct.
Okay. And again, one of those causes could be seizures.
Yes.
Can you go over again, why in this case did you determine that the seizure was unlikely, or what exactly was your determination with regard to seizures?
Sure. So with respect to seizures, seizures in the setting of a negative autopsy, the most normal finding in a brain, for example, of somebody with known seizures, is a normal brain. So if I have somebody come to my office with known seizures who has died in their sleep, or has died of a witness seizure or something like that, when I look at their brain, most of the time, most people with idiopathic epilepsy have normal brains. So a normal brain in and of itself does not exclude seizures as a possibility, and she certainly had a normal brain. However, the primary things in this case that I think in my mind have mitigated against seizure as a possible cause of her death are her age and lack of history. It was discussed that there was some recent history perhaps of seizures, but I could find no indication that had been evaluated, looked at medically, or in any way was concerning enough to have evaluated. New onset seizures with a normal brain in a 49-year-old is quite unusual.
And you were also asked about intoxicants. Is that, and again, just for the benefit of the jury, that is one other cause of death that could result in a negative autopsy?
It is.
And in this case, I believe you said you did, or there was one of the most extensive testing procedures done that you've ever been involved in.
Yes.
And I believe you were asked, did you consider potentially that this was a death from some kind of an intoxicant?
Yes, I mean, certainly that's one of the reasons we did all the testing we did. We were concerned that it was. And I think, as I mentioned yesterday, there's not an ability ever to totally exclude any possible substance, simply because the amount of testing that would be required to do that would be generally more than you even have samples to do the testing for. But the testing that we did excludes, hundreds and hundreds of possible substances, both, as I said, over-the-counter, illicit, and therapeutic medical substances, as well as a number of other toxins. And could there be something else? Certainly, but it's just very, very unlikely given the amount of testing that was done.
And in this particular case, you did rule out intoxicants as a likely cause of death. Is that correct?
Yes. And
what was the reason for that?
Just, again, the exhaustive nature of the testing that was done, and no indication that there was something else that we hadn't covered.
You were asked about those bruises again and again for the benefit of the jury. In looking at them and taking the samples, what were you able to determine with regard to a time of when those may have been inflicted?
So yes, they are acute injuries, again, with no inflammatory response, meaning they have occurred, sometime from right around the time of death to as many as several hours beforehand. But generally, it would be very, very unusual for them to be more than a day, and quite unusual for them to be more than 12 hours old with that finding.
And while you can't say for sure, did those bruises appear to be consistent with someone being restrained?
They are certainly consistent with that.
And the autopsy is just one part of the investigation you conduct, is that correct?
That is correct.
So part of your investigation and your expert opinion is based on external information provided?
It is.
You were asked again a little bit about the time of death. And did you review information regarding when the death was reported?
Yes.
And did you review information regarding what was reported in relation to the state of Tammy's body at that time?
I did.
And was the information you reviewed that she was cold and stiff?
Yes.
What would that lead you to believe as far as how far before the call she may have passed away?
Sure. So there are two parts to that. The cold part, if a body has cooled substantially, a person who's interacting with that body, we are used to interacting with each other at normal body temperature. And so any substantial decrease in a person's temperature is going to be perceived as cold. And whether that's, a few degrees or 20 degrees or whatever it is, it's really difficult to draw many conclusions from just an assessment of cold, other than that they have probably been dead for a while and their circulation has stopped. And so putting a time on that is not really possible based on cold. Based on stiff, again, rigor mortis is a process that develops over time. It's generally not there at all. When a person first dies, they remain flaccid for a period of time, and then become stiff in the ensuing 1 to 2 hours generally is when it starts, and will stiffen further to the point of where they're maximally stiff somewhere usually around 12 hours, and then that stiffness will persist until the body begins to decompose. So to answer your question, generally, if someone is described as stiff, again, that can be a variable thing, but at a minimum, at least an hour probably has passed since the person died.
And you were asked if she could have been laying there dead.
Yes.
In your experience, or would you be able to determine, would you expect a dead person to roll out of bed?
Not without some external force applied. So there are a number of scenarios that I have seen over the years where a dead body has moved. Generally speaking, that is in the setting of decompositional changes, where the body is actually changing shape and configuration because of bloating and other postmortem changes. That does not happen in the early postmortem period. And a person who is, recently deceased would not be expected to move on their own without the application of some other external force.
And again, based on the autopsy and then the investigation you conducted, What did you determine to be the cause of death?
Asphyxia.
I have nothing further.
All right, thank you, Ms. Blake. That will conclude the testimony then of this witness. Let me inquire of the state, is the witness allowed to be released from any subpoena?
Yes, Your Honor, we would request he be released.
We have no objection.
All right, with no objection from the defense then, Dr. Christensen, thank you for your testimony. You can be excused. The bailiff will help assist you out of the courtroom. All right, is the state ready to call another witness?
Yes, Your Honor.
Who will that be?
Detective Bruce Mattingly.
Very well. Sorry, I interrupted the clerk for just a second here to check something. Okay, thanks. Yeah.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you.
Thanks. All right, Detective Mattingly, how long has it been since you testified?
More than a few days.
Okay, more than a few days. Let me just inquire before you testify again. Have you reviewed any of the trial testimony since you last testified?
No, I have not.
Okay, thank you for that. With that in mind, then, you previously testified, so please adhere to the same rules we gave you the first time around. And with that in mind, the state can commence with the direct examination when you're ready.
Thank you. Detective, I know you previously spelled your name, and I may have missed it. Did you just spell it again?
Yes. Last is Mattingly, Mattingly.
And again, I know you've testified before today, but I'm going to go over a few more things with you, or a few things that you may have already gone over, just to refresh the jury's recollection on some of it. Where are you currently employed?
Fremont County, Idaho.
How long have you been employed with them?
22 years.
What is your current title and/or position?
Detective.
How long have you held that position?
About 6 years.
What other positions have you held within that agency?
I've worked as a detention deputy, patrol, a school resource officer, and then into a detective position.
And were you in fact working as a detective there on October 19th of 2019?
Yes, I was.
Did you receive a call regarding an unattended death?
I did.
And did you learn who the decedent was?
Tamara or Tammy Daybell.
Do you recall, and actually I'll back up there, do you know why you were called regarding that unattended death?
Yes. The Deputy Greenhall had been called out to an unattended death in our county, and as for our procedure, she's to call a detective to talk about the death and to see if a detective was needed.
And were you on shift that day?
I was not.
Were you the on-call detective?
I was not.
Did she tell you why she ended up reaching out to you?
She did. She did try.
I'll object, Your Honor, to hearsay.
I'll sustain that objection.
That's fine. Based on what she reported to you, did you end up responding out?
I did not.
Did she report that she found anything suspicious?
She did not report anything.
Do you know if other individuals responded out?
No other deputies, no.
Do you know if the coroner responded out?
The coroner did respond, yes.
At some point, did you learn of a prior incident that had been reported regarding Tammy Daybell?
I did. Deputy Greenhall, in her explanation of what was...
And I'll object, Your Honor, to hearsay.
I'll overrule at this point.
So Deputy Greenhall, in helping me understand the location and past circumstances, had told me about a prior event on October 9th, 2019, to where Deputy Cannon had responded out there for a suspicious call of, I believe it was a paintball gun that had been pointed at Tammy.
Had you been involved in that investigation involving the paintball gun?
No.
At some, actually, let me back up there. Do you know if additional investigation was conducted into the death of Tammy Daybell on October 19th?
No, there was no additional on that date.
At some point, was additional investigation started into the death of Tamara Daybell?
Yes, there was.
Do you know if the Fremont County Sheriff's Office was involved in that?
They were.
Did you personally become involved in that investigation?
I did.
Do you recall when you became involved?
Yeah, I started around mid-December of 2019.
Do you know if the Fremont County Sheriff's Office had already been involved at the time you personally became involved into that investigation?
Yes.
And had they been?
They had been.
Do you know approximately when Fremont County became involved in that investigation?
They started that investigation about the 1st of November.
I'm going to back up a little bit. Do you have any specialized training in order to be a peace officer?
I do.
And what is that?
So I attended the Post Academy or Police Academy, and from there I have my certificates of basic certificate, intermediate certificate, advanced certificate, and master's certificate. And then from there I also have specialized training as a detective and in death investigations.
When you became involved into the death investigation regarding Tammy Daybell, do you know if there were other related investigations being conducted?
There were several.
And do you know what those were?
Yes. Besides ours, there was Rexburg PD and the FBI were searching for Tylee Ryan and JJ Vallow, the missing children. And in Arizona, there was Brandon Boudreaux's attempted shooting in Gilbert, Arizona, and Charles Vallow's death in Chandler, Arizona.
Would it be fair to say that this became a joint investigation?
Yes,
Did you also assist in the investigation involving the missing children?
I did.
And focusing on the investigation involving the death of Tammy Daybell, did you review statements that had been made by Chad Daybell regarding the circumstances surrounding the death of Tammy?
I did, yes.
Did you also review statements Chad Daybell had made regarding Tammy's health?
Yes.
Did you do any further investigation regarding looking into Tammy's health?
I did.
And what was that?
We got a search warrants for Seasons Medical, Teton Medical, and Walmart Pharmacy.
And Your Honor, I think previously the state had submitted the business record certifications for a couple different exhibits, but the exhibits themselves had not been admitted. They're admitted by stipulation, is my understanding. So I have State's Exhibit 38A, which is the Teton medical records, 39A, which is the Walmart pharmacy records, and 40A, which is the Seasons medical records, that I would ask to be, I believe they've maybe previously been admitted, but only the certificates were submitted to the court. So I would ask to submit those, and just to make the record clear, ask that they be admitted.
Okay. Let me inquire of the defense then on 38A, which is the Teton medical records, Teton Health.
Yes, Your Honor.
Was there a objection to the admission of 38A from the defense?
Your Honor, I'm sorry, I don't have that in front of me. Is 38 the certificate of authenticity?
I think it's the corresponding exhibit, and 38 was the certificate, and 38A would be the report itself. Is that right?
That is correct, Your Honor. It would be the medical records.
Previously not objected to the certificates of authenticity under Rule 902 of the Idaho Rules of Evidence, and so if that attaches to that exhibit, then I don't have any objection.
Okay, so that's on 38A. On 39A, which would be the Walmart pharmacy records, I believe, being offered. Any objection on that, Mr. Archibald?
No, Your Honor.
And then on 40A, seasoned medical records, any objection there?
The same inquiry, just to make sure that the certificates have been previously admitted.
Okay. Before those are offered to the witness, then perhaps they could be shown to the defense to make sure they correspond to the...
And Your Honor, at this juncture, the state does not intend to publish them to the jury. We just wanted to admit them. I will have some questions regarding them if the defense wants an opportunity to review them.
Okay. Would you like to review them, Mr. Archibald, or just move forward?
If the witness is going to be testifying about them, then yes, I'd like to see a copy.
Okay. Let's have them shown to the defense then, Ms. Blake. Thank you.
It's just a disc. Are they previously?
And I don't know, is the defense okay with me starting with some questions and then determining if you want to take a break to review those in more detail?
Yes.
Okay, we'll do that then. Since they're not being published, if there's some concern raised, I'll allow the defense to maintain a provisional objection there.
Thank you, Your Honor. And in looking at those medical records from an well, let me back up. Did you actually review those medical records?
I did.
In your review of those medical records from an investigative standpoint, did anything stand out to you?
No, nothing stood out as far as what we we're looking to cooperate for information such as seizures or seizure-like activities, fainting, or dizzy spells.
Did you see anything in the medical records that indicated that Tammy had any issues with fainting?
She did not.
And I'll object, Your Honor. Foundation.
What's the foundation for that?
And, Your Honor, I think I've previously asked the witness if he looked at the medical records and just from his investigative standpoint, if anything stood out to him, and that goes to what he does next in his investigation. So I think the medical records speak for themselves, but this is his review of those and how it assisted or pushed his investigation along.
All right, the objection's overruled. You can continue, Ms. Blake.
Did you see any indication that Ms. Daybell had any dizziness or dizzy spells?
None.
Did you see any indication that she had any seizure-like activity?
She did not.
Did you notice anything with regard to her having low blood pressure?
There was no low blood pressure reported.
So from your review of this, did it corroborate statements made by Chad Daybell?
No, they were completely opposite.
And what, if anything else, did you do with regard to looking into Tammy Daybell's health?
From there, we had reviewed some pictures from the crime, from the scene of Tammy's death, and found that there was a Fitbit on her nightstand. And so we looked into getting a search warrant from Fitbit for information that Fitbit could possibly have, such as heart rate, sleep patterns, and her activity levels.
And did you end up actually obtaining documents from Fitbit?
I did, yes.
Did you personally review those responsive documents?
I did.
And from your review of those, what, if anything, did you discover?
So the Fitbit warrant, the information that came back, we were able to identify it as her account, Tammy Daybell's. And from there, even though we were hoping for heart rate and sleep patterns, because of the device that she had, those were not recorded. But what was recorded were her step counts and her level of activity.
And I'm going to ask that the witness be handed State's Exhibit 108A. These are just slides that are attached to a PowerPoint. I previously have given defense a copy. There's a copy for the court, a courtesy copy for Your Honor, and if the witness can be shown the other one. Detective, could you look at those pages? Did you assist in preparing an exhibit today in preparation for your testimony?
Yes.
Do those slides or those photos appear to be an accurate depiction of the information put into that PowerPoint?
Yes.
And would that aid in your testimony today?
Yes.
Your Honor, I would move for the admission of State's Exhibit 108A. I would indicate what the court has is just the printouts. The actual exhibit is on a jump drive.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
All right, Exhibit 108A is admitted.
And I would request permission to publish.
You can publish it.
And Detective, does the information on the screen look familiar to you?
Yes.
And where have you seen that information before?
That would have came from our search warrant from Fitbit.
And with what we're seeing on here, were you able to identify or determine who the Fitbit belonged to?
I was. We used her email at tammy.daybell@gmail.com, her information that she had entered.
And did you look at other things to verify that this device was Tammy's?
I did. Another thing that we looked at was who her friends were that she had listed, and a few of them were her children, Leah, Emma, and Seth Daybell.
And you talked about wanting to look at the heart rate in relation to this information that was recovered. I believe you indicated you were unable to obtain that information. Do you know why?
As I understood, it was because of the device which she had. As you can see up there, it's the Alta device, right about there. And that's a low-end model which shows a heart rate as it's being used, but it does not record the heart rate.
And you also indicated that you were looking to see if she wore it to bed. Were you able to make any determination regarding that?
Yes. It looked like she very rarely wore that to bed at night. Every so often, it looked like maybe she fell asleep with it, but it didn't stay on.
And was there a reason that you were focused in or hoping that she had worn it to bed?
The reason we were looking for that was so that we can narrow down that time of death.
You said that you did discover some information on the Fitbit, though. What is this next slide showing some of the information you recovered?
It is, yes.
And what are we looking at on this?
So that's the total amount of steps per month that Tammy had taken for the year of 2019.
Did you do anything to determine if that was a significant amount of steps per month?
I did. Just because the numbers looked big to me didn't mean that they were accurate or how active they were. So after a review of what the national average was for steps, I was able to look at these numbers and determine whether she was below average or if she was average or above average.
And what was your determination ultimately?
So I found in the month of January and February she was a little bit below average, but from March up through October she was above average.
And to be clear on this slide, would that be January of 2019 that we're looking at the bottom?
That is correct, 2019.
So from the bottom to the top is the order it goes in?
Yes.
And again, what was the date, or the day, I should say, that Tammy was reported as deceased?
The report came in on the 20th.
And would the October data then be missing part of the month?
It would, yes.
So that would have been from the 1st of October up until the time of her passing?
Correct.
And was the death reported on the 19th of October?
Yes.
And that was of 2019?
2019, yes.
So from your review of this data, what did you determine with regard to how active Tammy was?
Tammy was very active up until the time of her death.
At any point in your review of this data, I think you said some of the first months start out a little lower. Did you see any slowdown in her activity in the months leading up to her death that seemed significant?
There was no slowdown.
I think you may have said, but did you also speak with coworkers, neighbors, and others regarding Tammy's health?
I did.
What, if anything, did you learn from speaking with, from interviewing other individuals?
I'll object, Your Honor. That question calls for hearsay.
Sustained.
Through your investigation, did you find anything to support that Tammy was having health issues?
I did not.
Did you determine whether or not she was involved in clogging or other fitness classes?
I did, yes.
And was she?
She was. She was involved in Zumba, which is a high fitness class, a clogging class, and she had been preparing for a 5K, and which she did complete.
Do you know approximately when she would have completed the 5K?
It was just before school started.
In 2019?
In 2019, yeah.
And as part of the investigation surrounding Tammy's death, do you know if it was determined whether or not she had any life insurance policies?
She had 2.
And did Fremont County Sheriff's Office do anything in relation to those policies?
Yes, we obtained 2 search warrants.
And do you know which companies she had life insurance through?
She had 2 life insurance. One was through Primerica, and the other was through LifeMap.
Were those the companies that the search warrants were sent to?
They were.
Did those companies in fact provide responsive documents?
They did.
And did you review those responsive documents?
I did.
And Your Honor, I have what's been marked as States 122A and 151. Again, these are documents in which there were business record certifications, and it's my understanding would be admitted by stipulation.
All right, 122A has been offered. Could you identify what those are specifically, Ms. Blake?
Yes, 122A is going to be the business record certification for Primerica and the corresponding documents. And 151 is going to be the LifeMap document.
All right, on 122A, does the defense have any objection to those being admitted?
If I could see the exhibits.
Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, I also have that States Exhibit 152 and 153, which are attached to the LifeMap documents. 152 would be the beneficiary's statement. 153 would be the employer's and/or administrator's statement.
All right, we'll allow defense counsel to review these for a moment.
I have reviewed them, Your Honor. I don't have any objection.
Okay, so Exhibit 122A is admitted. Exhibit 151 is admitted. Exhibit 152 is admitted. Exhibit 153 is admitted.
And Detective, focusing in first on the Primerica documents, did you in fact learn who the insured was on that policy?
Yes, on the Primerica there were 2 insurers. It was Tamara Daybell and Chad Daybell.
And do you know who the beneficiaries were?
Beneficiaries were the same.
So each of them had a policy or were listed on the same policy as both insured and beneficiaries of each other?
Yes.
Were you able to determine from a review of those documents how much the policy on Tammy was for?
$300,000.
Do you know if that $300,000 was paid out?
It was.
And who was it paid to?
Chad Daybell.
And with regard to the life map, were you able to determine who was insured under that policy?
That was Tamara Daybell,
And do you know who the beneficiary was?
Chad Daybell,
Were you able to determine an amount on that policy?
$80,000.
And do you know if that amount was in fact paid out?
Yes,
Do you know who it was paid to?
Chad Daybell.
And do you know on that life map policy if there was an additional $50,000?
Yes, there was.
And the total payout on that one would have been $130,000?
That would be correct, yes.
But the $80,000 was a little separate from the $50,000.
Yes.
I can have just one moment.
Yes.
I don't have any further questions, Your Honor.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Blake. Thank you. Mr. Archibald, cross-examination.
So, Detective, with your investigation into Tammy's death, did you learn that the defendant, Lori Vallow Daybell, was in Hawaii at the time of Tammy Daybell's death?
I did.
And did you also learn that that Lori Vallow Daybell's device was not on the property of Chad Daybell on October 9th or on October 19th, 2019?
It was not.
Now, these medical records that you reviewed, do you recall what kind of medications Tammy Daybell was taking?
She was on tramadol and, pardon the pronunciation, but fluoxetine.
Do you know what those medications are for?
Tramadol, I believe, is for pain, to help treat pain, and the fluoxetine is for depression.
And in reviewing the medical records, were you able to determine what type of pain Tammy Daybell had?
I just know it was in reference to a pain in her wrist.
And in your investigation, you learned that she was taking medication for depression. Do you recall how long she had been taking that medication?
I don't remember the exact year or how long she had, but it had been for a few years.
And was it something that she had an active prescription for?
Yes, it was.
In reviewing the medical records, could you determine if she was also in any kind of counseling for depression?
No.
In reviewing this Fitbit information, it appears as if she was taking about 10,000 steps a day. Is that fair to say? Sometimes more, sometimes less?
Correct.
Okay. And then the 5K run, would that have maybe been in August of 2019? Because that was a high month.
It could have been. I don't know when it was specifically.
Now, in your investigation, you also learned that Tammy Daybell, what she did for a living. Is that right?
I did.
And what did she do for a living?
She worked at the school, elementary school, as a librarian and something with computers.
And so, during your investigation, you learned that she was active at her job as a librarian or as a computer teacher.
I did.
Anything in her school personnel file, anything in there that would that stuck out to you?
There was nothing.
She was a good employee.
She was highly spoken of.
And on the insurance payouts to Chad Daybell, was this life insurance something that had been applied for years prior to 2019?
On which one?
Well, you tell me how long these insurance policies had been in place.
So the Primerica, that one they had established many years prior to even moving to Idaho. They had that when they were living in Springville.
And is that the 300,000 one?
That is the 300,000. Yes.
Okay. Go on.
And then Life Map, that was one provided by the school.
Okay.
And
that was the 80. That was the 80,000 one.
80,000 plus the 50, so 130,000.
Okay. So the Primerica had initially started. That insurance had started in Utah.
Yes.
Before they moved to Idaho.
Correct.
And then the Life Map was just part of her job insurance.
It was.
So any activity on that insurance that had begun in, say, 2018 or 2019?
On the Life Map there was.
And what was that?
So she had previously worked there part-time, and then when she worked full-time, she was eligible for a certain max amount. And then after a year or more of working there, she was eligible for, I believe, 5 times the amount of her yearly salary, and that's where the price increased.
Okay. And 5 times the amount of her annual salary, would that have been the 50,000?
I'd have to review some notes. I don't know.
Did she make about 10,000 a year as a school librarian?
Close to that.
Okay. Any indication from your investigation that the life insurance company wanted their money back for fraud?
That was discussed.
Did they take any action to get their money back from Chad Daybell?
I don't recall if they did or not.
So not as far as you know?
I can't remember.
Okay. If that would have happened, you would have known about it?
More than likely, yes.
All right. Thank you, Detective.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Archibald.
That wraps up segment number 1 of our coverage in today's courtroom action of the trial of Lori Vallow Daybell. There's more to come. Press subscribe so you don't miss any of it right here.
This is continuous coverage
Continuous coverage. Continuous coverage.
in the trial of Lori Vallow Daybell from the Hidden Killers podcast.
Hidden Killers Podcast.